This is the Red Line Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Red Line Radio Network. It is Thursday evening. Early evening sports buffet with the Ginch. I am said Ginch here, host Brian F. Everything sports. We'll get into some stuff a little later. But my guest this evening, Mr. Larry Schechter, at Larry Schechter 2 on the Tweeter machine, author of The History of Fantasy Sports and Winning Fantasy Baseball. He's been called one of the best fantasy baseball players in the world. Larry was a two-time winner of the CDM Sports National Salary Cap Contest, defeating 7,500 teams in 2002 and 6,000 teams in 2005. He is here to talk about his book, The History of Fantasy Sports. Let's bring him on. There he is, Larry Schechter, ladies and gentlemen. Larry, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So let's just delve into it here. Fantasy sports has always sort of intrigued me, has fascinated me, just from the standpoint. First of all, I stink at fantasy sports. You got to really do your homework. So, but I don't think most people realize that, I was trying to research some stuff. Early simulations of fantasy sports go all the way back to like the 1800s.
Yeah, that goes back to like tabletop games. Started with like you'd slide a penny into a spring-activated bat that would hit the penny into various holes for like single, double, home run, stuff like that. And then they started to get a little more advanced, like like board games, like Dick Allen's All-Star Baseball.
Yep, I remember.
Then you got to Appa and Stratomatic.
Look, it really started to take. I didn't start playing fantasy. I think the first time I played fantasy was fantasy football back in '94, and it was just a bunch of guys that got together. You had one quarterback, one running back, one wide receiver, one tight end, a defense, and a kicker, and you just came up with your own point system, whoever the commissioner was. So, fast forward to before the internet. It really started to take off, I would say, in the late '80s, early '90s, when it really started to get some momentum, no?
Well, there are various levels to it. Fantasy football actually started in 1963. The first fantasy football goes back all the way back to '63, and it started spreading in the '60s and '70s. The advent of the internet changed everything. That made it so easy for people to play. Fantasy baseball really started, for the most part, in the 1980s with Dan Okrent. There were a lot of people were playing primitive versions of fantasy baseball by themselves before '80. But in '80, what happened is Dan Okrent invented a very kind of complex fantasy baseball game, kind of like chess compared to everybody else was playing checkers. And the other thing is Okrent and the people that were in his first league were all in the media, so they got publicity for what they were doing. And so that's why, unlike anybody else who had like some kind of primitive version of fantasy baseball, didn't get any publicity, so it didn't spread. But Okrent, they got articles published in magazines and stuff like that, so people heard about it and it spread. And then 1984, they got a deal with Bantam Books to put out a book about the game, and that's when it really started to take off.
So when the internet hit, how did it explode when the internet hit? Because I know there weren't a lot of sites when the internet started, but it just seems like over the last 20, 25 years, it's just absolutely exploded.
As I said, the internet just made it easy for people to play. You don't have to be there in person. It's easy to sign up for a league, play over the internet. And before that, another big change was the invention of computers, because originally, when people started playing in the '80s and whatever, '70s, '80s, the commissioner of the league would have to do all the stats by hand, and that would take the commissioner like 8-10 hours a week to do all that. Computers made it obviously easy to do it, and in my book is not about any kind of fantasy, how to play fantasy sports. It's all about the history of what happened. And my idea originally was, nobody has ever done this. Nobody, there's no book like this. Nobody has ever explained how we went from ideas that people had years and years ago to where we are now with this, $25 billion worldwide industry with millions of people playing everything from fantasy baseball, fantasy football to cricket, fantasy bass fishing. It's like fantasy everything. So I thought, somebody's got to do this. Somebody needs to write a book about this and explain how it all happened. So when I started researching, it turned out to be a much bigger job than I ever imagined. It took 18 months of full-time work. When I started researching everything and interviewing people, I started hearing fascinating stories. And I realized early on I could write a book, The History of Fantasy Sports, say who did what, when, how it all happened, and that would get the job done. But it would also come off as a very boring research paper. But by incorporating the stories of what people did that I was hearing, it would make it easy to read, interesting, fun, something inspirational. So that's what happened. It turned out better than I could have imagined. The reviews are great. People say it's very easy to read, fascinating. Um, and I'll give you like one example of that, and I know you're in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
When computers came out, I just say, people realized like, hey, we could do this. We could do fancy stats on computers, so a commissioner doesn't have to spend 8 hours a week. There's a couple in Pennsylvania, Jim and Gloria Berger. They were one of the first stat services. They did it for baseball and basketball. What you had to do back then was for baseball, you would get the USA Today. On Tuesday, they had the National League statistics. Wednesday, they had the American League statistics. I think I got that backwards. And Gloria would read the statistics to Jim. He'd enter it into a computer. And on Wednesday night, they would print out the reports to their clients. So that's kind of like a who did what when.
Right.
Now here's like the book is called The History of Fantasy Sports, and the subtitle is "And the Stories of the People Who Made It Happen," which is where I sought to incorporate these things. That's where I got the subtitle from. So that was the who did what when. Now here's like the interesting twist. One Wednesday, Gloria went into labor with her first child, and they didn't let that stop them from getting their job done. So in between contractions, Gloria read the statistics to Jim and he entered in the computer. And then she'd be like, oh, wait, hold on, here comes another one. They passed. And she continued. They got the statistics out on time in the mail Wednesday night, and their first child, their daughter, was born that day. And now, 38 years later, that daughter plays in a fantasy football league with her dad.
Oh wow. Fast forward to like today's modern game. Look, ESPN's had their fantasy thing for a long time, CBS and Yahoo and all these others. But when FanDuel and DraftKings came into the picture, how did that completely change the game of fantasy sports?
Well, first of all, a lot of people, especially younger people, were not interested in the 6 months or whatever commitment of season-long fantasy. So daily opened it up to a whole other market of people who just want to play a day at a time, or a day of 1 day a week or whatever. So very flexible. And if it's May, you're too late to play season-long fantasy baseball. It already started, but you can pick up daily anytime. So it opened it up to a whole lot of people that weren't playing, and a lot of people that play season-long fantasy play daily also. The part of the allure is the chance to win big prizes. There's a very fine line between daily fantasy and gambling. It was deemed to be non-gambling, but there's the whole legal aspects of fantasy is like a whole topic by itself. My book has a couple of chapters on legal issues. The first big legal issue was, well, actually not the first, but one of the big legal issues was, do you have to pay the professional leagues licensing fees to use the statistics? fantasy is based on all these statistics that the players produce. So that was a big legal issue. There's a chapter in the book that's mostly about that. And fortunately, fantasy won that you don't have to pay licensing fees to use statistics, or else things would look quite different than they are now. Another big legal thing was with the whole issue of gambling. The whole issue of gambling goes way back to the very beginning. The first fantasy football league in 1963 was a guy named Bill Winkenbach was a part owner of the Raiders. He basically came up with the idea for fantasy football. I mean, the way it happened actually is in the late 50s, he had a very primitive game for fantasy baseball and fantasy golf. And he mentioned this to a couple of people, and they're like, we should do that for football. And that's how they started. So in 63, they started the first fantasy football league. One of the guys in that league was Andy Musolimus, and he owned a bar in Oakland. And then that next year, he thought it would be a good idea for business to offer fantasy football to his patrons at the bar. He thought it'd be fun, good for business. So people were interested. They started a fantasy football league. It grew from there. The next year, they had a second league, then a third league, then a women's only league because the guys didn't want to play with the women. But the point in the first year that they had it in 63, what they would do is like they'd have a league of 10 teams, and if I got a touchdown, everybody else in the league gave me 10 cents.
Okay.
And they would call that they'd have like a 10-cent league, a 20-cent league, but they called it points instead of cents because they didn't know if maybe one day the vice squad's going to bust in, and the rest of the gambling. So the whole gambling issue goes back to the very beginning. And over time, it was always like that, is fantasy gambling. And in the 80s, there were a couple incidents where the vice squad arrested some people at the Fort Lauderdale Fire Department for running a fantasy league. In Austin, Texas, some people at a bar were arrested for a fantasy league. And it took years and years, and finally, the courts, the federal government and most states finally ruled fantasy is not gambling. The litmus test is generally is something more skill or luck. If it's more luck, it's gambling, like a roulette wheel, complete luck. But they determine playing fantasy is more skill than luck, and therefore it's not gambling. Now there's still about 5 states that don't agree, about 5 states where it's still illegal. But the federal government, most states, it's legal. And then when DraftKings and FanDuel came along, they really tested the limits of the legality, and that was a whole other story where they were like this close to getting shut down, but it was deemed to be legal.
The Rotisserie Baseball League. I was just reading some of the. Daniel Okrent is credited with introducing the Rotisserie League, correct?
Yes, he is. There's a story that's a big myth. There's basically a myth out there that he magically came up with the idea on a plane ride from Connecticut to Texas, and that's not true. It actually goes back like years. The whole start of it goes back years before then. I interviewed him for like more than 3 hours to really get the story straight.
When you look at today's modern fantasy stuff and you see all the legal stuff, Larry, that's going on, is there any sort of big time regulation that might come along down the line? Because I already know that some of I can't remember if it was FanDuel or DraftKings that are going to do away with prop bets for players. I can't remember if it was the NFL or the NBA or whatnot. But you always see stuff now coming out about there are certain outfits that get the players and say, look, if you do X, Y, and Z on your prop bet, you're going to make a lot of money if you just do this. So I don't know what the answer is going on down the line, but you'll see more and more of it come out.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at Emmanuel Classe. Crazy. I mean, it's crazy. The guy ruined his entire career, making millions of dollars. I assume people listening to this know what I'm talking about. If not, they can Google it. But he threw pitches not for strikes on purpose to win a prop bet. It's interesting. It's not. It's not 100% certain that the government might look at some of this stuff again, particularly with the daily fantasy sports, not so much season-long sports. But I'll tell you, something that is amazing is there's 50 million people in the U.S. age 18 and up that play fantasy sports, and that doesn't even count underage 18. There's a lot of underage 18 that play too. So now I knew this going in, writing the book. I had already heard that statistic, but what I didn't know, and is really amazing, there's more than 200 million people that play fantasy cricket in India.
Wow.
200 million. But now what happened though is when the guy that started this, he was from India. He went to college in England, and he saw what was happening with fantasy soccer, and he's like, "This is great. I got to bring it back to India for cricket." And he brought it back and started a company, and it did not do well at all. A couple of years, lost a lot of money. But then they made a change, and they started following the DraftKings FanDuel model, where they're having small entry fees, big prizes, and that made it successful, made it incredibly successful following the DraftKings FanDuel model. And the company got up to, as I said, more than 200 million users, and the company was valued at $8 billion. And they had the same kind of legal struggle that what DraftKings and FanDuel went through, where finally the Supreme Court of India, whatever that's called, deemed that it was not gambling and therefore it was legal. That happened a while ago. However, more recently, they just changed it. They changed the laws in India where you cannot have entry fees and prize money for fantasy sports in India. So the whole company, it's still in existence. They still have a lot of users. They're offering free games and other stuff, but their value has plummeted.
A couple more things and I'll get you out of here. One thing I have to ask, because I'm always fascinated, because I hear more and more about this conversation every day, is the fact that people think now that fantasy sports, especially like some of the big time things, some of the big time contests, it's just rigged for another way for the sharks to make money. What say you? Is there any pushback on that on your end?
Well, fantasy sports is for a couple of things. A lot of people, probably most people, play fantasy sports for fun. A lot of people are in fantasy sports leagues. There's no money involved. There's very little money involved. And so that's one thing. But when you get into there's high stakes leagues where there's the NFBC and NFFC and some other leagues where there's could be like a $1,700 entry fee. It's high stakes, and that's more competitive. That's more money, and you probably want to know what either you want to know what you're doing to be in that league, or you got you've got enough money where you don't care if you lose $1,700. Daily fantasy, some of the sharks win. I'm not really answering your question.
Well, I mean, I just think it's just another way for some of the sharks to make money. It's just another way for them to cash in big. So my last thing would be, where do you see fantasy sports going in the future? I mean, FanDuel already has their own network. DraftKings has their own network. Where do you see the conglomerate that is fantasy sports heading in the next 10 years?
I have no idea. Just people always ask me that. I was researching how we got from the beginning to here, where we're going. People. Peter Sankey, who was the head of RotoWire. He's one. I interviewed dozens and dozens of people, and Peter Sankey. One of the things he said is there was a certain point in time. I don't remember offhand when it was. Probably 10, 20 years ago, where He's like, there's so many people playing now, and there's so many different games, and there's all these things. It's like, I don't see how we can possibly grow any further. And
Mhm.
then DraftKings and FanDuel come along, and other things come along. So I don't know, but
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna, but what people did to create this industry is amazing. Like, the book starts at precursors to fantasy sports, like the board games and APA and whatnot. Then you get into the invention and spread of fantasy baseball, the invention and spread of fantasy football, then commercial games and publications and radio and TV, and then high stakes leagues and, everything right until, through the daily fantasy and then worldwide expansion.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Larry Schechter. I already see the books on Amazon, obviously, but tell the people where they can get your material. Tell the people where they can get a hold of you.
Well, yeah, the book's on Amazon, paperback and Kindle. It's also on most booksellers' websites. You can get paperback or ebook. I'm on, I hate to say X. I'm on Twitter,
Twitter.
now X. People say X, formerly Twitter. I'm saying Twitter, now X. Yeah, it's Larry Schechter 2, because Larry Schechter got hacked and I can't get it back. So I
Been
had like
there.
I had 5,000 followers. Now I got like 400 or something.
Uh, I will have to pick your brain once fantasy season comes around for NFL. Anytime
All
you
right.
want to come back on, let me know.
All right, sure.
Thank you,
Thanks for
sir.
having me.
Yes, sir. Sorry, Schechter, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the fantasy world, like I said, always, it fascinates me. It really does. I suck at it. I put my little 5-cent baseball teams in on DraftKings or FanDuel, and I win maybe 20 cents here, 50 cents there. I don't win the $200, $200, whatever it is. Then the NFL, I always seem to get close, but I never win anything big. So thanks to him for coming on, talking about his book, talking about the history of fantasy sports. Again, it always intrigues me. Major League Baseball kicked back off again today after the All-Star game. I did not know there was a game today. I thought they were not going to kick back off till tomorrow. Right now, top of the eighth, the Mets over the Phillies. Phillies at home, All-Star weekend, and they get the home game. It's 3-0 Mets. Top of the eighth, much to the chagrin of Phillies fans. Around the world in sports, if you didn't watch the game yesterday, World Cup, England snatched defeat away from victory. They were up 1-0. And I heard all the analysts saying that England and Mr. Tuchel, the manager, they went defensive too early. It was almost like they were playing prevent defense. And when the John Man used to say, the only thing a prevent defense does is prevents you from winning. So, and everybody knows the history between England and Argentina. Diego Maradona with the hand of God. I think that was back in, was it 82? I could be wrong. Was it 82? 82 or 84, somewhere in there. I don't remember. It was one of those years, 82 or 84. But we have it set now on Sunday, the championship match, Spain and Argentina. Hola Español. Of course, the consolation game will be England and France for the third place. This for the third place. I don't know who will be more ready to play that game. France is obviously disappointed. England is obviously disappointed. France never really looked all that good against Spain. So would you rather sort of get your butt kicked 2-0 or lose 2-1 and the other team scores 2 goals within 6 minutes to beat you? So I don't know which team will be prepared more. It'll be interesting to see how England and France approach this game and how they come out. LeBron James said he's not ready to reveal his next team, but it'll be fun. Go figure. Reported by Dave McManaman, ESPN. On Tyrese Halliburton's podcast, Mind the Game, he asked LeBron straight out, is there a decision that still has to be made? LeBron said, we literally talked about this in the back. James said, reiterating that revealing his next team would not be on the agenda. So he says it's coming soon, but I don't know if this is going to be sort of a big thing where he, goes before the media, calls a press conference like he did before he went to Miami. And I don't know if it's going to be that. I would hope it's not like that, but we'll see. Giannis came out today and said that he is hungry to chase championship at the Miami Heat. He said, right now, I'm at like 1,000,000% right now. You walk through the hallways and you see the history and you see the players that have been part of this organization and things that they've done. I want to make all the moves that they've made worth it. He went on to say, it's a place I feel brings pressure and I thrive under pressure. It brings the best out of me. I'm excited to be coached by Eric Spoelstra. I'm excited to be around the city. I understand the fans are very passionate, but right now I'm hungry to win. I want to win, and I will do whatever it takes for me to win. Saying all the right things. Maybe sort of like some subtlety there for Mr. James to come to Miami. I know there's a lot of people think he's going to go back to Cleveland. Look, Cleveland has a fantastic squad. They do. Unfortunately, they just ran into a Knicks team that's hot. And we'll see. I think he's going to wind up with the Heat. But we will see. Over there across the pond, the Open Championship concluded its first round. Jackson Suber is your leader. Shot a 565 to lead the British Open. Roy McIlroy set a 2/72, disappointing for him. Scotty Scheffler shot a 268. Mr. Suber leads after the first round. What else here? Tim Keane, men's national team captain, came out and said that they're still in shock following their poor performance in exiting the World Cup. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It was a great showing by the U.S. squad, but they just aren't on the level of some of the better teams in the world. Period. I know U.S. fans want to think they are, but they're not. Belgium kicked their ass. Take your ass whooping, learn from it. And if anybody can go back to the last time that USA played Belgium, Belgium kicked their ass then too. Soccer is just not a hotbed in this country, or football across the globe is what it's called, football. It's just not a hotbed. Yes, you've had some European players come over and play in the league over here, but it just has never taken off like I think some of the pundits thought that it would. Major League Baseball is going to open their season March 24th next year, pending the lockout. Why don't you just start it on St. Patrick's Day? Start it on St. Patrick's Day. Why not? You're going to keep going earlier and earlier. Start it on St. Patrick's Day and have games in the South and have games out West to kick it off. It's just getting more and more ridiculous. So those are some of the news and notes from around the world in sports today. I saw something that I wanted to thought I had written it down. Oh, the Phillies just scored bottom of the eighth. It's 3-1 now, Mets. Oh, um, was it the NBA I saw this? Oh, it was not the NBA. I don't know where I saw it. It was the NBA. Were they going to go to 84 games instead of 82? No, it's the NHL. The NHL. I believe the NHL is going to go to 84 games. Uh, there's talk of the NFL going to 18 games. But the owners in the league are really concerned about player safety. We're just going to keep adding shit. We're going to keep adding more games, start earlier, go deeper. I'm tired of hearing from the owners and the leagues. You don't give a shit about player safety because if you did, you wouldn't want to keep adding stuff. They're just worried about this. And it's a joke. Let me go to golf. Like I said, Mr. Subal is in the clubhouse after the first round of the leader, 5 under. 2 players at 4 under, 66. Daniel Brown and Sunjai Im. Then you have a slew of guys at 3 under, just 2 back. Bryson DeChambeau with a good first round. He's 3 under. He's only 2 off the lead. If you look at Henrik Stenson, 2 under, the big Swede. Good to see he's playing well. I said Scotty Scheffler's 2 under. Colin Morikawa's 2 under. Alex Fitzpatrick, one of the favorites. He is 1 under, 4 off. Terrell Hatton and Tommy Fleetwood, Englanders, they're 1 under. John Rahm's 1 under. Shane Lowry is 1 under. Brooks Koepka is even, and so on and so forth. Didn't see many major NBA news. Some of the stuff I went over yesterday. Well, Pat Riley said that he's made a pitch for LeBron. That ended badly there. But, years of smoothing over. I still think, I know my man Wallencheck thinks that he's going to wind up with Cleveland to end his career. But the opportunity to play against Giannis, I think will be enough, intrigue him enough to go there. Yeah, nothing big there. Major League Baseball, I've gone over. Chase Burns and the Reds have reached a 7-year, $105 million extension, according to Jeff Passan, ESPN. First year with the Reds here, he's 11-1 with a 2.54 ERA. Let's see here. The deal, which buys out 2 of Burns' free agent years, has no club options and runs through 2033. It is the largest ever for a pitcher who has yet to reach arbitration, and the 3rd biggest contract in Reds history, behind extensions given to Joey Votto, 10 years, $225. Ken Griffey Jr., 9 years, $116 million. Burns is making $785,000 this year. So congratulations, young man. You are now making $15 million a year. That's a jump of $14 million. So congratulations there. Top of the 9th, Mets 3, Phillies 1. What else from the world of baseball? reported by ESPN News Services. Phillies Brad Keller, he has a torn UCLA. He is done for the season, unfortunately. So bad news for the Phillies. The Pirates, my Pirates, have acquired Robert Hassel III in trade with the Nationals, according to the Associated Press. Doesn't say what the deal was for. I went over the whole Lance McCullers thing the other day. The X-rays were negative for Mr. Caminero. He was hit by a pitch the other day in the All-Star game. So good news there. NFL next week. I think some teams are starting up their camps next week. All of this other stuff I've been through the last few days. Let me just jump to something here. Tell you when said teams will report to training camp. If you're looking for the early mini camps, the training camps, yes, it will be starting on the 25th or 22nd through the 25th next week. Early training camps that will start: the Arizona Cardinals, the Carolina Panthers, Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots, Los Angeles Rams, and the 49ers. July 24th through 28th, July 24th, veterans for the Falcons and the Ravens report, and July 28th, veterans for the rest of the organization's report. Eagles and the Steelers on the 28th. I was looking for the rest of the schedule. I'll just go down the list for us. We already went down the Cardinals, the Falcons, July 24th, the rookies, July 28th, the veterans, Baltimore Ravens, the 24th, rookies, the veterans, the 28th. Buffalo Bills, July 21st, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Panthers we've already been to. Chicago Bears, July 25th, the rookies, July 28th, veterans. The Bengals, July 25th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Your Cleveland Browns, July 23rd, rookies, July 28th, veterans. The Cowboys, July 28th, for both rookies and veterans. The Broncos, July 22nd, rookies, July 28th, veterans. The Detroit Lions, July 25th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Green Bay Packers, July 27th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Texans, July 21st, the rookies report, July 28th, the veterans. For the Colts, July 27th, and the veterans, July 28th. For the Jaguars, not a Jaguar, it's a Jaguar. July 25th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Chiefs, July 24th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Raiders, July 23rd, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Chargers, July 23rd, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Rams, July 25th, period for both. The Dolphins, July 21st, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Vikings, again, July 26th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Patriots, July 21st, rookies, July 24th, veterans. For the Saints, rookies and veterans both on the 28th. The New York Giants, July 23rd, rookies, July 28th, veterans. For the Jets, July 25th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Eagles have already been through it, both Eagles and veterans. The 49ers have already reported. The rookies, well, no, I lied. July 18th for the rookies, July 25th for the veterans. For the Seahawks, July 17th, rookies, July 24th, veterans. For the Buccaneers, July 27th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Titans, July 23rd, rookies, July 28th, veterans. And for your Washington Commanders, July 24th, rookies, July 28th, veterans. Yes, next week, It's back. As far as the NFL goes, I believe most of the media days. Let me just jump to college football real quick. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to give the ladies some nerve. In the WNBA yesterday, everyone's talking about like this whole Caitlin Clark thing about her getting fouled and the ref saying the initial. I'm tired of talking about it, to be quite honest with you. I made a suggestion to Caitlin. My suggestion is just keep your mouth shut. Don't say a word. Don't show anybody that it bothers you. Because if you start showing refs, other players that it bothers you, again, you think you get fouled, even though they may think you initiated the contact. Don't run with the fist and all that. Just laugh. Laugh. Brush it off. Just laugh. Yesterday in the WNBA, the Sky over the Storm 95-90, the Lynx over the Sparks 96-87, and the Valkyries, ladies and gentlemen, having a great season 88-75 over the Fever. Tonight, right now, the Fire are hammering the Mystics in the fourth, 63-50. The Liberty and the Wings have been postponed. I know Texas is experiencing some flooding down there yet again. Thoughts and prayers to the people down there. I wanted to get to college football. There was nothing major in college athletics. Sorry, semi-pro sports at the college level. The media days will be wrapping up here soon. I believe the ACC is having theirs this week. I have to go back to the schedule. And I lie. SEC media days will be July 20th through the 23rd, which will be next week. Big Ten has their media days late, July 28th through the 30th. And to be honest with you, I don't know why they insist on having stuff late. Who else? I think that's the end of it. Next Tuesday, it'll be Illinois, Iowa, Penn State, Rutgers, USC, Wisconsin. Wednesday, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Oregon, Purdue, and UCLA. And then next Thursday, 2 weeks from now, sorry, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Washington. So I think I'm going to end it there. Again, thanks to Larry Schechter for coming on here and talking about his book, The History of Fantasy Sports. Again, you can get it on Amazon. Just trying to see if anything came over the ticker. It did not. Let's see what the update is on the Phillies Mets. Oh, mid-ninth. Mets scored again. It's 4-1 Mets over the Phillies. We are headed to the bottom of the ninth. Phillies with the last chance to tie, go in the lead, and then send it into, well, if they take the lead, they win. And if they tie it, we go in extra innings. So see what the Phillies do there. This is what I'm going to pick for the World Cup. I think the third place game, unfortunately, I think France will win that. Again, France losing convincingly 2-0. In the way they did, they really weren't competitive. England losing in the fashion that they did, I just think that that's going to be hard to rebound from. You're up 1-0, you're looking good, you're thinking you have it, And again, I listened to the game on the radio. I did not see it, but all indications were that calculation-wise, England, Tuchel substitutions, they went defensive too quickly. I just think losing in the fashion that they did, as opposed to losing in the fashion that France did, I think gives France the slight edge. I'm going to have France winning 2-1. Championship game. Argentina, Spain. I'm sorry. Argentina just seems like they're destined to win this thing yet again. They've been counted out so many times over the last 4 games. They just find ways to get it done. I'm not saying Spain's not going to be competitive. It's the battle of the European champions against the South American champions. So it just seems to be something about this Argentinian team, and Messi. Messi now regarded as the greatest soccer player ever. Maradona, Argentina, living legend. If Messi wins another one, Messi's already above Maradona as far as soccer players go or football players. If Messi can lead this team to another one, we're talking in my lifetime, maybe a stratosphere a football player might not ever reach in my lifetime, the rest of the time that I'm on this planet. So, again, thanks for our Schechter coming on. Enjoy whatever sport you're going to watch. I hope you enjoy the World Cup this weekend. Again, NFL training camps start kicking in next week. The media days for college football will be winding down at the end of the month. College football teams will be reporting for training camps in August. It's starting to ramp up, ladies and gentlemen. As I say at the end of each show, practice compassion, practice empathy, have passion for whatever it is you do. Hug somebody every once in a while, you might make their day. Tell somebody you love them, you might not get a second opportunity. And for God's sakes, if you see somebody struggling in whatever fashion, inquire, ask questions. What's wrong? Do they need help? How can you get them help? Because you might not just be saving a life. You might be saving a multitude of lives. The other thing I have to do before I forget, because I'm a dumbass, let me pull it up. Let me go here. Let me go everywhere. Let me do this. So that's going to do it for tonight. Again, stay safe out there, being affected by the smoke from the Canadian fires. Please stay safe. It looks like the heat wave is going to be over here. Hope you made it through that. Enjoy whatever sport you're going to watch this weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Stay safe. I'm out. There's only one thing left for me to do. And that, well, no, I'm doing another thing. Now I can say, Daddy Don Meredith, take me out. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Turn out the lights, the party's over. They say that all good things must end. Call it a night, the party's over. And tomorrow and next year starts the same old thing again.